The screech of metal against marble echoed through Lincoln Center's David H. Koch Theater like a gunshot. André Rieu'S priceless 1667 Stradivarius, worth more than most Manhattan penthouses, slipped from his trembling fingers and clattered toward the stage floor. Only the maestro's lightning-quick reflexes saved 4 centuries of musical history from destruction. "Stop the music," he commanded his orchestra, his voice cracking in a way that sent shockwaves through the 3,200 patrons who had paid astronomical prices to witness what was supposed to be the pinnacle of classical entertainment. What happened next would be replayed on social media platforms across 6 continents within hours, sparking debates about miracles, family secrets, and the transformative power of music that continue to this day. In the front row sat an 11-year-old boy named Kyle, his frail body confined to a wheelchair, his bald head gleaming under the theater's spotlights. In his skeletal hands, he clutched a crumpled piece of paper that his caregiver had just handed to André's assistant during what should have been an intermission. The note contained only a few sentences, written in the shaky handwriting of a child racing against time. "My name is Kale. I'm 11 years old and the doctors say I have 5 weeks left. My dying wish is to hear the song my mother used to play before she passed last year. She said it was a secret melody that only our family knew. But it wasn't just the heartbreaking request that caused André Rieu, a man who had built an empire performing for royalty and presidents, to fall to his knees on the most prestigious stage in America. It was the melody that young Kyle had somehow sketched on the bottom of the paper, a series of notes that André hadn't shared with another living soul in 32 years. A composition he had written for his mentor Lysander Blackwood, the virtuoso who had saved his career after André's devastating failure at Carnegie Hall decades earlier. The same Lysander Blackwood who had died tragically before André achieved international fame, taking with him secrets that were now somehow known by a dying child in a Manhattan theater. The tension backstage was suffocating. André had never, in 4 decades of performing, interrupted a concert. His 60-piece Johann Strauss orchestra, trained to follow his smallest gestures with military precision, waited in bewildered silence while their conductor disappeared into the VIP lounge without explanation. "Where is the boy?" André whispered to his son Matthias, who served as the orchestra's manager. His voice was barely audible above the murmur of confused conversations filtering in from the audience. "In the green room, as you requested," Matthias replied, concern etched across his features. "Father, we have thousands of people waiting, television cameras broadcasting live to 40 countries, contracts worth millions of dollars. If we must, then we must," André interrupted, his diplomatic composure shattered. "I need to speak with him now." What the audience didn't know was that Kale's handwritten note contained more than just a request. The melody the boy had sketched wasn't merely familiar to André, it was impossible. Those precise notes, that specific harmonic progression, belonged to a composition André had titled The Circle of Hope, written during the darkest period of his life when a 29-year-old André had contemplated abandoning music forever. He had played it only once for Lysander Blackwood, as a tribute to the man who had pulled him from the depths of professional despair. The melody was buried so deeply in André's past that he sometimes wondered if he had dreamed it. Yet here it was, rendered in a child's uncertain hand, note for note, perfect. In the VIP lounge, Kyle sat motionless in his wheelchair, his thin frame ravaged by 2 years of aggressive chemotherapy treatments. Despite his physical deterioration, his green eyes burned with an intensity that seemed to challenge death itself. Beside him sat his father, Ezra, a weathered construction worker whose hands shook as he watched his son's labored breathing. André knelt before the wheelchair, studying the boy's face with growing amazement. "Kyle, that melody you wrote on your note, where did you learn it?" The boy looked surprised by the question. "My mother taught it to me. She said it was a family secret, something that belonged only to us. She used to play it on her violin every night before I went to sleep, especially after the doctors first told us about the cancer." André's face drained of color. "Your mother, what was her name?" "Serafina," Ezra answered quietly. "Serafina Blackwood. Before I married her, she was Serafina Blackwood." The name hit André like a physical blow. Blackwood. It couldn't be coincidence. Was she related to Lysander Blackwood, the violinist? Ezra nodded slowly. That was her father. She always told Kale that his grandfather was a brilliant musician who had once played with a famous violinist, but she never gave details. "I thought they were just stories to inspire him during his treatments." André gripped the armrest of the wheelchair to steady himself. "Lysander's daughter. The man who had been like a father to him had never mentioned having children, but here sat his grandson dying, asking to hear the secret melody that André had composed for Lysander over 3 decades ago. The universe had closed a circle in the most cruel and perfect way imaginable. "Can I hear the song, Mr. Rieux?" Kyle asked, unaware of the emotional earthquake he had triggered. Mom always said that when someone played it with their whole heart, she could hear it wherever she was. André wiped away a tear. "Not only will you hear it, Kyle," he whispered, "but you're going to play it with me. For your mother, for your grandfather, for everyone who needs to know that some melodies are too powerful to remain hidden." The boy's eyes widened. "But I've never played violin. I wouldn't know how." André smiled through his tears. "Trust me, some music lives in our blood. You don't have to learn it, you just have to let it out." What André didn't know was that this encounter would reveal a dark secret that had been buried for 32 years. A secret that would shake the foundations of the classical music world and rewrite André's own legacy forever. As the audience grew restless and social media exploded with rumors about André's sudden disappearance from the stage, the maestro found himself trapped in a flood of memories he had spent decades trying to forget. "Lysander Blackwood saved my life," André began, the weight of years heavy in his voice. "I was 29, broken and defeated after critics destroyed me, following a disastrous performance at Carnegie Hall. I was about to sell my violin and give up music forever. Your grandfather found me in a bar in Greenwich Village, drunk and suicidal. He was already a legend among New York's classical elite, but instead of dismissing me, he took me to his modest apartment and showed me a truth I had forgotten. Music isn't created for critics, it's created for the soul." Kyle's eyes grew distant. "That's what my mother always said too." André nodded sadly. "Lysander became my mentor. He taught me not just technique, but how to open my heart to an audience. For 8 months he trained me, often until dawn. Then one evening I composed a melody for him, a thank you for saving my career. I called it The Circle of Hope." "That's it!" Kyle exclaimed. "That's the song Mom always played." André nodded, tears streaming down his face. 2 weeks after I gave him that melody, Lysander died suddenly of a heart attack. I was devastated. I promised him on his deathbed that I would protect that melody, that I would only play it when the moment was perfect, when it would mark something as important as what he had done for me. "You've never performed it in all these years?" Ezra asked in amazement. "Never in public," André confirmed. "It was too personal, too sacred. I didn't even know Lysander had a daughter. He never spoke about family." A heavy silence fell over the room. Ezra looked at the floor, his voice barely audible. "There's a reason he didn't talk about Serafina, a reason she only discovered after his death, when she found letters hidden in his effects. Letters that changed everything she thought she knew about her father." André felt a cold chill run down his spine. What kind of letters? Letters proving that Lysander's career was sabotaged by someone he trusted, someone who was threatened by his talent. Those letters revealed a conspiracy to destroy his reputation, orchestrated by Ezra paused, then looked André directly in the eyes. "By André Rieu'S, your father." The words struck like a physical blow. André staggered backward, his face ashen. "That can't be true. My father was a conductor, he barely knew Lysander. The letters, Mr. Rieu'S, Serafina kept them her entire life. After she died of cancer last year, I found them among her belongings, along with a diary where she wrote about her hope that Kyle would someday learn the truth and that the cycle of betrayal would finally be broken." André could barely breathe. His father, the man who had inspired him to become a musician, would have sabotaged Lysander's career. It was unthinkable. Yet there had always been unanswered questions about his father's sudden rise in the New York music scene during the exact years when Lysander Blackwood, once hailed as America's greatest violinist, mysteriously faded into obscurity. Kyle's voice interrupted his spiraling thoughts. "Mom said that music has the power to wash away lies, that when you really play from your heart, the truth has no choice but to come out." André looked at the boy, Lysander's grandson, whose life was almost over before it had truly begun, a child who asked for one simple thing, to hear the melody his mother had played for him. In that moment, André realized that the promise he had made to Lysander to play the melody only at the perfect moment had finally arrived. "Pierre," he said resolutely to his son Matthias, "bring my backup Stradivarius and ask Clara to get her smallest violin." "Father, what are you planning?" André's eyes blazed with renewed purpose. "I'm going to keep a forgotten promise. I'm going to tell the truth, whatever the consequences may be." While Matthias rushed away, André knelt beside Cale. What I'm about to ask is unprecedented, but I believe it's what your mother and grandfather would have wanted. Will you join me tonight in presenting this melody to the world for the first time? A composition that waited 32 years in silence, no longer a hidden melody, but the opening movement of a new symphony that will resonate for generations. The boy's eyes filled with tears of joy. Could that really happen? With music, my young friend, anything is possible, even miracles. What no one could foresee that evening was that the greatest miracle was yet to come, connected to a secret clause in Lysander's will that would only be activated when the Circle of Hope was finally performed publicly. Backstage, chaos reigned. The production director screamed into his headset as television producers threatened breach of contract lawsuits. The concertmaster of the Johann Strauss Orchestra desperately tried to calm 60 formally dressed musicians who still stood on stage before an increasingly impatient sold-out house of 3,200 patrons. "This is insanity," declared Julia Chambers, the concert manager, to Matthias. "We can't just put an untrained sick child on stage with a $4 million Stradivarius." "Tell that to my father," Matthias replied, carefully arranging Clara's smallest violin and André's backup instrument on silk cloth. Meanwhile, André worked intensively with Cale, who had never held a violin before. The maestro gently placed the small instrument under the boy's chin. "You don't need to know the notes," André explained patiently. "I'll play them for you. What I'm asking is far more important. I want you to think about your mother, about the way she played this melody, and I want you to let your heart speak through the violin." "But that's impossible," Cale asked, confused. "You can't play violin without learning how." André's eyes twinkled. "The greatest secrets of music aren't learned, Cale, they're discovered. Trust me." Ezra watched anxiously. "André, my son is very weak. The treatments have him." "I can do it, Dad," Cale interrupted, a determination in his voice that Ezra hadn't heard in months. "I want to do it for Mom." At that moment, Matthias burst in, his face pale. "Father, there's a legal problem. Ferdinand Blackstone is here." André tensed. Ferdinand Blackstone was the most feared attorney in the American music industry and had been his father's former legal advisor. "What does he want?" "He says he must block the performance of the Circle of Hope. He has legal documents signed by Father before he died. He claims that if you play that melody, you risk losing complete ownership of the Rieu's music catalog." A dark cloud passed over André's face. This confirmed his worst suspicions. There was a connection between his father and what had happened to Lysander. "Bring him here," André commanded. Moments later, Ferdinand Blackstone stood before them, a thin man in his 70s with cold eyes that studied Cale as if he were an insect. "André," he began smoothly, "this is a highly unusual situation. Your father gave specific instructions. My father is dead, Ferdinand, and apparently he kept many secrets hidden." Blackstone smiled thinly. "Your father protected his legacy. Your legacy. This melody you speak of is legally problematic. There are clauses that—" "What clauses prove my father sabotaged Lysander Blackwood's career?" André interrupted. "What proof exists that he stole musical works that weren't his?" Blackstone's smile vanished. "Be careful with such accusations, André. They can have consequences." "The only consequence that interests me right now," André said, pointing to Cale, "is keeping a promise to this boy's grandfather, a promise that's 32 years overdue. If you perform the Circle of Hope tonight," Blackstone warned, "you activate a clause in your father's will that recognizes a certain inheritance claim. It could cost you half your empire." Now, everything became clear. André's father had legally protected himself in case the truth ever came to light. He must have known that André possessed Lysander's melody. "Let me guess," André said bitterly, "that inheritor would be Serafina Blackwood, Lysander's daughter." Blackstone's sharp intake of breath confirmed it. "But Serafina died last year," Ezra added quietly. "Then the inheritance would pass to her son," André concluded, looking at Cale. "Which means if I perform this melody tonight, I'm legally acknowledging that this boy has a right to half of everything I've built." The room fell silent. Matthias looked shocked. Julia stood open-mouthed. Ferdinand Blackstone's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Precisely," the attorney confirmed, "which would naturally be absurd. This boy has no connection to he is Lysander's grandson," André interrupted. "The man to whom I owe everything, whose lessons made me who I am. If my father robbed him of his rightful place in music history, then it's high time we made that right. You can't seriously consider giving up half your life's work for a sentimental gesture." Blackstone protested. André looked at Kyle, who had listened breathlessly to these revelations about family he had never known. "Kyle," André asked gently, "if you could choose between all the money and fame in the world or one perfect performance that your mother could hear, what would you choose?" Without hesitation, the boy answered, "The music. Always the music." André nodded, a wave of clarity washing over him. "That's why he's Lysander's grandson," he told Blackstone, "and that's why I'm going to play that melody tonight, whatever the consequences." He turned to Matthias. "Prepare the orchestra and place a second chair on stage." As Matthias left, André leaned toward Kyle. "Are you ready to make history, young Blackwood?" For the first time since they had met, Kyle's face radiated something more powerful than hope, certainty. "I'm ready, Mr. Rieu'S." The auditorium was dead silent when André Rieu'S finally returned to the stage, 59 minutes after he had disappeared. Without explanation, he walked directly to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice different than the audience had ever heard it. Broken, raw, but filled with an intensity that was electric. "Tonight I ask you to witness something that has never happened before and will never happen again." A murmur went through the crowd as two stagehands placed a second chair on the platform. "Music," André continued, "has the power to bridge time, to restore justice, and to connect souls that were separated by chance, or perhaps by deliberate design." He paused, his eyes scanning the audience that hung on his every word. 32 years ago, I wrote a melody for a man who saved my life when I was about to give up music forever. His name was Lysander Blackwood, a violinist whose talent was so great that others feared it, a man whose career was destroyed by jealousy and betrayal. André's voice broke, and the audience could see the pain etched across his face. "I promised Lysander that I would only play this melody, the Circle of Hope, when the moment was perfect. I never knew that perfect could also be heartbreaking." He gestured toward the side of the stage where Ezra pushed Kyle's wheelchair forward. Gasps exploded through the hall. Phones were raised. The international live stream zoomed in on the fragile boy in the wheelchair, his bald head accentuating the extraordinary intensity of his green eyes. Eyes that, as the cameras immediately registered, were the exact same shade and shape as André Rieu'S' own. "This is Kyle," André introduced, his hand resting on the boy's shoulder. "He is 11 years old, he has leukemia, and he is the grandson of Lysander Blackwood." Matthias brought André's Stradivarius and the smaller violin prepared for Kyle. With tenderness that moved the audience to tears, André helped the small boy position the violin under his chin. "What Kyle doesn't know," André continued, now looking directly at the boy, "is that his grandfather was more than my mentor. Lysander was my true musical father, and I have reason to believe that my biological father paid for that relationship with deception." A collective gasp echoed through the hall. André Rieu'S, always the diplomatic entertainer, had just dropped a bombshell that called his own legacy into question. "Tonight, we make this right," André declared. "Tonight, Kyle and I will perform the Circle of Hope together, the melody his mother played for him, the melody I wrote for his grandfather, and the melody that will finally liberate truths that have been hidden too long." He whispered something in Kyle's ear, and the boy nodded, his pale fingers gripping the violin's neck. André raised his Stradivarius, gave a small nod to his orchestra, and began to play. The opening notes of the Circle of Hope floated through the silent hall, a melody so pure, so heartbreakingly beautiful, that the audience collectively held its breath. It was unlike anything André had ever played or recorded, infused with raw emotional honesty that was simultaneously joyful and penitent. And then, to everyone's amazement, including Ezra's and Matthias's, Kyle began to play. Not hesitantly, not uncertainly, but with a skill that was impossible for a child who had never held a violin. His small fingers danced across the strings, perfectly synchronized with André, performing what could only be described as the counter-melody, a harmonic companion so perfectly complementary to André's performance that it seemed the music had always been meant to be played this way, by these two specific people, at this exact moment in time. Tears flowed freely down André's face as he played, his eyes meeting Kyle's, as an invisible current of understanding passed between them. In the third row, Ferdinand Blackstone stood and tried to rush toward the exit, but was stopped by security guards that Matthias had strategically positioned. On stage, the melody built toward a climax, André and Kyle now fully connected in a duet that defied the boundaries of what should have been musically possible. The orchestra, initially instructed to remain silent, began instinctively joining in, led by the concertmaster, who understood they were witnessing something transcendent. Then came the miracle no one was prepared for. Kyle stood up from his wheelchair. At first, the audience thought it was an illusion, a trick of light or their own emotions. But no, the boy who doctors said was too weak to stand independently was now upright, his violin still playing, his body gradually growing stronger with each note. Ezra fell to his knees at the edge of the stage, his hands folded in disbelief. Medical personnel on standby for Kyle's needs rushed forward but stopped, paralyzed by what they were seeing. The melody reached its pinnacle, and then in a moment of perfect musical synchronicity, André and Kyle looked at each other and added a third melodic line that neither had played before, a spontaneous co-creation that completed the two original parts in a trinity of sound that filled the theater with what could only be described as pure, unadulterated hope. When the last notes faded, there remained a silence heavy with possibility. André set down his violin and embraced Kyle, who was still standing, his cheeks now filled with color that had been absent before. That, André whispered into the microphone, was the circle of hope, completed as it was always meant to be. The applause that followed was deafening, a standing ovation that lasted 12 full minutes. People wept openly, strangers embraced each other, and the orchestra itself set down their instruments to join the clapping. But the real miracle took place backstage, when doctors examined Kyle and were stunned by what they found. His vital signs, previously so weak, were now strengthened. His blood counts, which had been alarming for months, showed signs of stabilization. "This is medically impossible," the chief physician muttered to Ezra. "Perhaps," Ezra answered softly, tears in his eyes as he watched his son still deep in conversation with André. "That's what miracles are. The impossible that happens when hope, love, and truth converge at the perfect moment." André Rieu, the man who had built his career on making classical music accessible, had just accomplished something far more important. He had proven its healing power in the most literal way possible. What no one knew that night was that the real impact of this performance was just beginning, and that the greatest revelation was yet to come, hidden in a laboratory where Kyle's blood samples would reveal a genetic connection that would provide the final puzzle piece in a story spanning 3 generations. 6 months later, the plaza outside Lincoln Center was filled with an unprecedented crowd. More than 20,000 people pressed into space, normally accommodating 12,000 us, all gathered for what was announced as a celebration of hope, a special concert featuring André Rieu and a surprise talented guest violinist. In the intervening months, the world had witnessed 2 extraordinary developments that media dubbed a musical miracle. First, Kyle's leukemia had gone into inexplicable remission. His attending physicians at Memorial Sloan Kettering had published countless papers on the phenomenon, proposing hypotheses about the psychological impact of meaningful experiences on the immune system. They called it the Rieu effect, a term that was picked up worldwide. Second, the legal aftermath of the Circle of Hope performance had led to a series of stunning revelations. As Ferdinand Blackstone had predicted, the performance had activated a secret clause in Willem Rieu's will that granted a significant portion of the family music fortune to Lysander Blackwood's heirs. But what no one could have predicted was what subsequent DNA tests revealed. Lysander Blackwood was André Rieu's biological father. The truth, meticulously documented in hidden correspondence later discovered in Ferdinand Blackstone's office, was that André's mother had had a brief but intense affair with Lysander before she married Willem Rieu. Willem had discovered this and taken revenge by systematically sabotaging Lysander's career while raising the child André as his own. The irony that André had returned to his true musical roots, unconsciously trained by his own biological father, was a story that novelists would have found too unbelievable. Now, 6 months after that fateful evening, André stood on the Lincoln Center stage flanked by his Johann Strauss Orchestra, ready to perform the first concert of what he announced as his Truth and Reconciliation Tour. "Ladies and gentlemen," André began, his voice amplified over the enormous plaza, "life sometimes writes stories too incredible to seem real. 6 months ago, I learned that the man who saved my career was also the man who gave me life. Tonight, I celebrate that discovery and the miracles that emerged from it." The audience cheered, many with tears in their eyes, holding signs reading, "The Circle of Hope." "And now," André continued, "I want to introduce you to the young man who made this all possible, my nephew." He paused, a smile playing at his lips at this technically correct but emotionally inadequate description, the incredibly talented Kyle Blackwood. The crowd exploded as Kyle walked onto the stage, not in a wheelchair, but walking under his own power, dressed in a small tuxedo that was a miniature version of André's trademark concert outfit. His hair had begun growing back, a soft blonde fuzz now covering his previously bald head. The transformation was stunning. The frail boy whose dying wish was to hear a melody now radiated health and vitality. In his hands he carried a beautiful, small violin, no longer borrowed but his own instrument, specially crafted for him. Since that evening, André explained to the audience while placing an arm around Kyle's shoulders, "This young man has studied violin every day. His doctors say it's impossible that he learned so quickly, but I know better. Some things are in the blood." The audience laughed and applauded. "Today is also special for another reason," André continued. "Today we officially announce the establishment of the Lysander Blackwood Foundation, dedicated to finding and supporting young musical talents from families who cannot afford instruments or lessons." On André's signal, a large screen behind the orchestra lit up, showing the first 5 young beneficiaries of the foundation, children from different parts of America, all with instruments they had received thanks to the foundation. "The foundation is funded by what I now call our family business," André smiled, gesturing between himself and Kale, "because as we've learned, family isn't always what it seems, but music always tells the truth." In the front row sat Ezra, his face marked by the emotions of the past 6 months, grief over the revelations about his father-in-law, joy over his son's recovery, and wonder at the new direction their lives had taken. Next to him sat André Rieu'S, André's son, whose world had completely changed in just 6 months. Initially, he had struggled with the shocking revelation that his grandfather Willem was not André's biological father, a truth that rewrote generations of family history. The DNA tests had been irrefutable, as had the hidden letters and photographs that Ferdinand Blackstone had tried to destroy. Matthias had spent nights poring over old family archives, uncovering a web of lies and deception that went back before his own birth. "I'm not who I thought I was," he had confessed to his father during those first chaotic days after the revelation. But André's response had changed him. "You're exactly who you've always been, Matthias. Our legacy doesn't consist of the names we carry, but of the music we make and the truths we dare to embrace." Now, as he watched his father and Kyle on stage, Matthias finally understood that some family bonds were stronger than blood. They were made of courage, sacrifice, and the sacred obligation to heal histories broken by fear and pride. "And now," André proclaimed, raising his famous Stradivarius in a gesture that millions of fans worldwide would recognize, "I invite you all to witness the complete performance of The Circle of Hope, a composition that waited 32 years in silence. No longer a hidden melody, but the opening movement of a new symphony that will resonate for generations." The evening air above Lincoln Center trembled with anticipation. The 60-piece Johann Strauss Orchestra, dressed in their signature tuxedos and evening gowns, raised their instruments in perfect synchronization. The audience could see the tension on concertmaster Frank Steiner's face as he prepared for a piece he had rehearsed with Kale for weeks, amazed by the boy's intuitive talent. As the first notes of the violins floated through the air, the giant LED screen behind the orchestra came alive with images revealing half a century of family secrets. There appeared a young Lysander Blackwood, handsome and confident, playing at Carnegie Hall in 1968, his fingers flying over the strings with exactly the same characteristic flair that would become André's trademark. The audience now clearly saw the striking resemblance. The same posture, the same emotional expression, the same way of holding his head slightly tilted during intense passages. The images shifted to show Serafina as a small girl, leaning against her father as he patiently guided her tiny fingers across a child's violin, her radiant smile reflected in her father's delighted eyes. The same smile that Kale now wore as he played. A yellowed newspaper clipping filled the screen. Blackwood European Tour suddenly cancelled. Influential patrons withdraw funding. The fine print, now enlarged for all to see, named André Rieu'S as one of the prominent board members who had discovered financial irregularities, accusations that were later proven completely unfounded. The tempo of the music intensified as a photo of young André appeared, perhaps 7 or 9 years old, concentrating on practice while André Rieu'S watched with a stern expression. A man who, as was now clear, was raising a talent he simultaneously despised and tried to control. And then, like a collective gasp that rippled through the crowd, appeared the photograph that changed everything, a secret moment captured between Lysander and Margareta Rieu, André's mother. Her belly clearly rounded with pregnancy, their fingers intertwined in a promise, their faces glowing with forbidden love. The date in the corner, 1971, 7 months before André's birth, told without words the truth that had been suffocated for so long. The final image dissolved into calligraphic words written in gold against a deep blue background. The strongest circles are those that, once broken, are healed with the golden glue of truth and forgiveness. The music swelled to an emotional climax, André and Kyle now completely absorbed in their duet. It was at this perfect moment of harmony that the miracle occurred that no one had expected. First, an elderly woman in the third row stood up, slowly pulled a violin from under her chair, and began softly playing along, her fingers fragile but sure, a former student of Lysander's from 1968. Then a young man on the other side of the plaza stood up, his violin already on his shoulder, and joined the melody with perfect precision. Like a wave spreading across a calm lake, violinists throughout the audience came into action. Dozens, then hundreds of instruments appeared from hidden cases and bags. The collective sound of more than 500 violins, merging with André and Kyle in a single voice, created an acoustic phenomenon that many would later describe as a sound wave of pure emotion. Cameras from the international broadcast zoomed in on André's face, which bloomed in authentic, unguarded amazement. A rare moment when the always polished maestro was surprised into speechlessness. His eyes filled with tears as he looked at the sea of violinists, many wearing t-shirts reading Blackwood Legacy. Next to him, Kyle radiated joy, his fingers flying over the strings of his new violin, an exact replica of Lysander's famous Guarneri, specially made for him by the same Italian violin maker who crafted André's instruments. The baldness of his head, now covered with a soft fuzz of returning hair, seemed to glow under the warm stage lights. "Was this your work?" Ezra whispered to Matthias, his voice barely audible above the overwhelming music. Matthias's lips curled in a smile that, for the first time in his life, was an exact reflection of Lysander Blackwood's smile in the old photographs. "A gift to two bloodlines that should never have been separated," he replied softly. "Some truths are too important to tell only in words. They deserve an entire orchestra." The production manager standing next to Matthias shook his head in awe. "Coordinating 500 secret violinists, all in perfect harmony without your father knowing. Impossible." "Nothing is impossible," Matthias answered, looking at Kyle, who had once been too weak to stand, but now radiated life. "Not when music finally speaks the truth." As the last vibrating notes floated through the summer evening air and 20,000 people rose as one in thunderous applause, André leaned toward Kyle, his arm protectively around the boy's shoulders. He brought his lips to the boy's ear and whispered words meant only for him. "They're here, Kyle. Your mother, your grandfather. They hear every note, feel every vibration, and in the great concert hall of eternity, they're giving you a standing ovation that will never end, not just for your playing, but for your courage to heal a broken circle that waited 32 years to be completed." A single tear slid down Kyle's cheek as he nodded, his eyes fixed on the starlit sky above Lincoln Center's historic plaza, his gaze filled with the certainty of someone who knows a truth that goes beyond words. The crowd's applause continued for nearly 20 minutes, a thunderous ovation that seemed to shake the very foundations of Manhattan. André and Kyle remained on stage, hand in hand, as confetti cannons released thousands of golden musical notes into the night sky, each one catching the light like tiny stars. As the celebration reached its peak, André raised his hand for silence. The massive crowd gradually quieted, sensing that their maestro had something more to say. In the sudden hush that followed, André's voice carried clearly across the plaza, amplified not just by technology, but by the raw emotion that had characterized this entire evening. "My friends," he began, his voice steady but thick with feeling, "tonight you have witnessed something that will be remembered not just as a concert, but as a moment when music proved its power to heal the deepest wounds and reveal the most hidden truths. But there is one more truth that must be shared, one final secret that brings this circle to its complete closure." The audience leaned forward, sensing that even after everything they had experienced, there was still more to come. 3 weeks ago, André continued, doctors completed comprehensive genetic testing as part of Kyle's ongoing treatment. What they discovered was not just confirmation of what we already knew about our family connection, but something that explains the inexplicable musical connection between this remarkable boy and myself. André paused, looking down at Cale with profound tenderness. The test revealed that Cale carries a rare genetic variant associated with perfect pitch and enhanced musical memory, the same variant found in fewer than 1 in 10,000 people. But more remarkably, this variant shows patterns that suggest it can remain dormant for generations before expressing itself in the presence of intense emotional stimuli. In other words, André smiled, his eyes twinkling. The music was always inside him, waiting for the right moment to awaken. The crowd erupted in amazed murmurs. Scientists call it genetic musical memory, but I call it proof that love and art can transcend not just death, but time itself. Lysander's gift to his grandson was not just blood, but a musical soul that waited 11 years to find its voice. As André spoke these words, Kyle stepped forward to the microphone, his young voice clear and strong as it carried across the plaza. "My name is Cale Blackwood, and I am the grandson of a man I never met, but whose music saved my life twice. Once through the love he passed to my mother, and once through the courage of Mr. André, who taught me that family is not just about who shares your blood, but about who helps you find the song that was always meant to be yours." The boy's words, spoken with wisdom far beyond his years, brought many in the audience to tears. "Tonight," Kyle continued, "I want to dedicate our performance to every sick child who dreams of something beautiful, to every family torn apart by secrets, and to every person who believes that music can change the world. Because it can. It already has." He gestured toward the crowd of violinists who were still holding their instruments. "All these people came here tonight because they believe in the power of truth and music. They are proof that when we have the courage to share our real stories, the whole world wants to help us sing them." As if choreographed by destiny itself, the 500 violinists began to play again, this time a gentle, improvised melody that seemed to spring spontaneously from their collective hearts. The sound was hauntingly beautiful, a musical prayer that rose into the night sky above Manhattan like incense. André and Kyle joined in, their 2 violins weaving in and out of the larger composition in a final testament to the healing power of music. When the last note finally faded into the night, the silence that followed was profound, sacred. Then, slowly, the applause began again, but this time it was different. It was not the enthusiastic clapping of entertainment, but the reverent appreciation of people who knew they had witnessed something that would change them forever. As the crowd gradually dispersed, many lingering as if reluctant to let the magic end, André and Kyle stood alone on the stage, 2 figures silhouetted against the glowing New York skyline. "So," André asked quietly, "how does it feel to have found your song?" Kyle looked up at him with eyes that sparkled with life and possibility. "Like coming home," he answered simply. "Like everything that came before was just practice for this moment." André nodded, understanding perfectly. "That's exactly how it should feel," he said. "And tomorrow, we start practicing for the next miracle." As they walked off the stage together, the boy who had once been dying and the man who had spent decades living with hidden truths, the last of the confetti settled on the empty platform like golden snow. Above them, the stars shone down on Lincoln Center with unusual brightness, as if the universe itself was celebrating the completion of a circle that had taken 32 years, 3 generations, and 1 perfect moment of courage to finally close. And in the quiet hours that followed, as New York City settled into sleep around them, the echoes of the Circle of Hope seemed to linger in the air, a reminder that some stories are too powerful to end, too beautiful to forget, and too true to remain hidden any longer than they already have.